When discussing some of the most popular and strongest champions in League of Legends, several may come to mind for you. Vayne, Miss Fortune, Nocturne, Maokai, Yone, and Twisted Fate. Across all ranks in the game, these champions have good pick rates in their role, with a positive win rate, and are some of the more popular champions in the history of the game. For a champion like Miss Fortune, I really can't think of a time where she hasn't been at least one of the better champions for climbing in lower elos. She's always been a staple pick because she's got a good, simple learning curve and doesn't require you to be a mechanical god to carry games. However, the champion I'd like to talk about today is much more elite skewed. In Silver through Emerald games, they average a pick rate right around 4.5%, which is by all means not unpopular, but does typically land them at around the 15th most played jungler in the game. The ban rate is just about the same at around 4.2%, which is relatively low at only about 20th for all junglers. But in Masters and beyond, we start to see the numbers climb substantially. The pick rate increases to 8.4%, and the ban rate spikes massively at 26%. Over the last year of time, there have been multiple players to reach rank 1 with a very good win rate, far surpassing the win rate for any other champion one-tricks. Across multiple servers, multiple patch cycles, and even a meta dating back to last season with the mythic items, the most successful solo queue players in the world play this champion. Despite her relative quietness in the lower brackets, high elo players have seen enough of this character. Bel'Veth has been the most dominant champion that we have seen in years in high elo. And today, we're going to talk about why. Today's video is sponsored by Repeat. Repeat is a platform that allows gamers like you to compete for prizes while playing your favorite games. The awesome part about Repeat is that it's the easiest thing in the world to start doing. Check this out, you simply go to the website, link your account, and there's no app, no download, or no fear of some kind of kernel level crypto miner. None of that stuff. You simply just go to the site and you can sort through the League of Legends tournaments and enter into one of the many different free entry ranked competitions. For each tournament, you can see the breakdown on how players get scored, and if you win, you'll receive a payout through the site. Repeat also has tournaments running for several other games that you may enjoy, and given that so many of these are totally free entry, there's literally no reason not to go sign up today. Seriously, the site works very well, it has solid payouts, and there's quite literally no downside to joining in on the fun of the competition. Thank you to Repeat for sponsoring this video today, and check out my link in the description down below. Go do it, go play. Two North American players in the last year have reached the top of the ladder with extremely high win rates. A couple months back, Maryville University jungler named Iconic, playing on an account called Amazo, hit rank 1 with over a 7 KDA and a 72% win rate. And just recently, a player named U13 hit rank 1 with nearly an 80% win rate on Bel'Veth in close to 100 games.
This guy has 71% win rate. His Bel'Veth is 79% win rate. That is insane. So annoying to play against Bel'Veth, in my opinion.
The funny part is that when Amazo hit rank 1 last season, it was only briefly after the rank 1 player on EU West was also a super high win rate Bel'Veth player. And this season on EU West, there's a player with the tag named Nikola Jokic who has over 800 LP in Challenger with a 72% win rate on Bel'Veth in 64 games. There's also a EU Northeast player who is currently ranked 33 with a 77% win rate on Bel'Veth over 60 games, and in their last 20, they are 16-4. To say that Bel'Veth players are abusing the kit is quite the understatement. No champion has had this level of domination over the top of the ladder in a very long time. Of course, there have been plenty of other strong champions, but I have not seen this combination of win rate and accounts of this caliber on any other champ. But before we break down and analyze what makes Bel'Veth players the most successful players inside of solo queue, I have to make one point of clarification. From this point forward, this video is not just going to be a complaint session about Bel'Veth. Let's be completely fair. No champion in League of Legends is actual freelo. All champions take a certain degree of skill because League of Legends is not just a fighting game where it's purely about reaction time and button combos. It's true that Annie is a far less mechanical champion than Nidalee. That part is undeniable, but that has nothing to do with macro, last hitting, jungle pathing, itemization, team fighting, warding, all that good stuff. This leads me into the biggest takeaway that you should have from this video. These Bel'Veth players are playing a very strong champion, one of the strongest we've ever seen in the history of the game, with some of the most agency and individual impact on the game that I've ever seen, but that does not mean that she is completely brain off free wins. With that out of the way and clarified, let's break it down and talk about how these Bel'Veth players are winning so many games. Runes and builds will always be subject to change from patch to patch and player to player, but as of right now, at the time of recording, Bel'Veth players are typically building something like this. You'll notice most of the time that we're getting a Doran's Blade on first recall in jungle, and this is quite intentional and not an accident. It's very important and we'll get into it a little later. A big misconception that I've seen some players have about Bel'Veth is that she's a late game scaling character, and honestly, it's understandable. Bel'Veth, just like Vhagar, Nasus, or Smolder, does indeed have an infinite stacking passive. Her Lavender grants permanent attack speed, but honestly, it's kind of bait. Instead, we get into reason number one why Bel'Veth is so elite skewed, which is that she's very early game focused, and high levels of solo queue always have shorter games. In general, it will always take more skill, game knowledge, and understanding to be able to play for the early game leads, being confident in the plays that you make in the jungle invades, than it does to just sit back and farm and scale. Bel'Veth players are some of the most prolific and effective counter junglers in the game, with a lot of their leads being generated from invades, both level 1 with the team as 5 and by themselves. These plays are extraordinarily effective, but it requires good map awareness, understanding the game state, paying attention to which lanes have priority, and mechanical confidence. None of these things are easy to master, nor would be the strengths of a lower tier player. The early game jungle pathing that the rank 1 Bel'Veth player does is almost exclusively Raptors into invade. Consistently every game he's looking to kill the enemy in their jungle and fight them off their camps. If you've ever played against a good Bel'Veth, you'll know about the Raptor invade. Simply put, it feels like when you're jungling against her, she has 7 camps and you have 5. You're always going to be handicapped 1 camp because it takes her no time at all to snipe these away. This is why in the runes we take flat health and build a Doran's Blade. Fully speccing into the early game allows for these plays to be much more successful, as the early game health is what allows you to be so strong. The general jungle pathing, as per usual, is pretty complex and hard to understand. Getting a sense of the map, knowing where to be, and knowing how to path is basically the entire skill of the game, but after studying a lot of Bel'Veth games from these players, here's what I picked up on. Generally, full clearing and perfect cycling is not ideal. And it's at this point where I'm going to have some players ready to type their comments, but Kellen, what about Agarin? You see, over the past couple of months, there's been a very popular video that went around on YouTube talking about Agarin and how he was able to get rank 1 in Korea. Agarin is an amazing player. He's a long-time challenger jungler who has always competed for the top of the ladder. He is one of the most successful solo queue players ever, and his style, his approach, and his logic behind the game is pretty simple. Jungle camps are guaranteed resources and farm, whereas ganks feature some element of randomness and relying on teammates. So in theory, unless you can identify a gank that is nearly 100% guaranteed to work, if you have camps up, you should be looking to take those first. This logic is airtight and makes sense. He has proven this to be extremely effective, but there's still some context that must be applied. The champions and styles that Agarin plays are almost exclusively hard farming and fast clearing junglers. When Brand Jungle was buffed to have the best clear in the game, Agarin immediately gravitated towards that champ. He plays well into his personal style that he plays. And it's because of this, I think that a lot of players and junglers misunderstood the video. Very often you're seeing these coin flip ganks and invades where the Bel'Veth player turbo camps one side of the map so hard that it's impossible to play the game. Ganks are a lot less coin flip as Bel'Veth precisely because she's such an excellent ganker. Look at this insanely good gank. Before this play, the game state is rather close. It's only 2-0 in kills, and top lane specifically is very much even, with Garen only being ahead about 200 gold. By the end of this amazingly good lane gank in this entire play, Garen gets the kill, the farm, and the turret, and he ends this play with an unreal 1500 gold lead. Just like that, top lane is over. The other thing that's kind of crazy is just how cookie cutter OP her level 1 invade strategy is. Because her level 1 is so ridiculously strong, more often than not she'll just force herself into your jungle, take your raptors, and kill you. I suppose that it's not guaranteed to work, but it's about as close to being free as anything in this game ever will be. Now, obviously all junglers can gank and invade, right? Because that's the entire point of the role. It's not as if Bel'Veth is the only champion that can turn the tides of the game and make massive plays. The point is that because her ganks and invades are so good, her farming is good, and she has amazing mid-game teamfighting with all of the resets, it ends up meaning that she's basically strong at every point in the game. She's kind of like like an all-around character in a fighting game or an RPG. She does everything well and has no true weaknesses. Look at how crazy this feels. The Talia doesn't seem like she should be so far behind that she gets completely destroyed. Yes, Bel'Veth does have 2 kills, but Talia is up in farm, is up a camp, and is even in experience. It's true that mechanically the Bel'Veth plays it very well. She doesn't get flicked or comboed whatsoever, and honestly, it's a very nice mechanical check. But the damage is what's pretty shocking here regardless at this point in the game. This match specifically shows how Bel'Veth likes to play and what makes this champion function at such a high level. The team play and coordination with the mid laner and support makes Talia's life miserable in the jungle as she's constantly pressured off her camps, and this is going to be much more successful as you can rely on your teammates the higher and higher elo you go. In challenger games, this is almost unavoidable. In the mid game, the Bel'Veth is actually down a decent amount of farm in jungle camps, but it doesn't really matter because we can permadive bot and ruin that lane over and over again. The idea here is that you use all of the gold and pressure to then create a farm lead later on and constantly invade. You can force the enemy jungler into such a bad spot where they have no choice but to keep farming since they know they can never really match you in these ganks. And this is also what this player excels at: counter ganks. In this game, we ruin the bot lane so hard by killing Kai'Sa what feels like 50 times. There's a level 1 invade where we kill her, multiple tower dives, you know, the typical ADC experience, and she gets way behind. Eventually, the Rammus tries to gank to help the team and get them back in the game, but we're ready for the counter gank, and it turns into yet another positive play. In the end, Kai'Sa straight up decides to start laning mid after getting so mad about being dunked on and camped, and that's exactly what makes Bel'Veth so strong for solo queue. This is a challenger game where somebody gets this mad and tilted over how much she got screwed. When deciding to gank in one route to a certain lane, what you need to make sure of is to defend your opposite side camps. And this is a perfect example. We recalled after ganking bot to buy items, and because we spiked on these items, we immediately run to defend the top side. I noticed this happening a lot, where the enemy jungler decides to invade the opposite side of where you're ganking, which is exactly what you're supposed to do in this situation, but if you're quick about that and you can react accordingly and predict it, you can catch them there. Another thing that I noticed is how extremely keen these players are on looking around the map and finding fights, which again is all macro based and is pure game knowledge. Right here, Bel'Veth wants to go clear her Krug camp, and while walking towards it, she is keeping her camera panned around. Once noticing that a fight breaks out mid, we are there to answer. And it's plays like these that separate the good players from the great ones. Getting a lead is one thing, but utilizing it well to close out the game is another thing entirely. With the new season, Bel'Veth can now gain her true form on the grubs by just taking 1, and you should be putting massive priority on grabbing it. Every Bel'Veth player that I watched was hovering around the grubs as soon as they hit 6 if they were alive. Having your form on and keeping a consistent uptime is everything, because when you have your form, your champion is significantly stronger. Kills like these, not just due to the stats, but the fact that you can go over walls with your Q, are not possible unless you have your form. This leads me into the final thing: her Remora and split pushing. This is truly where her overwhelming agency comes into full effect. Because Bel'Veth is a fantastic sieger with all of the extra voidlings, she has a ton of individual agency to end the game with her leads, which is a very big thing for solo queue, as the gameplay is so uncoordinated and messy with such little macro. In a similar way that a Yorick or Scion player can win the game through split pushing and sieging, Bel'Veth kind of can too. Obviously it's not nearly to the same level, but that's because that's exactly what those champions do exceptionally well. They're also not early game spam ganking invading junglers on top of that. The fact that she gets to do this at all is basically just added whipped cream on top of the ice cream sundae that she already is. So what should Riot do? Well, I think nerfing her seems completely reasonable and should absolutely be considered, but does she need some kind of major kit adjustment? Honestly, I don't know. The total damage reduction at 70% on her E at max level is pretty toxic and unfun to play against, and I would like to see that be a little lower, but I also truly think that Bel'Veth should have her scaling be changed around a little bit so her early game isn't nearly as strong. The issue is that her mid and late game are not even bad, so she's currently not giving up anything by being strong during the early game. Yes, it is true that her scaling is pretty much a bait like I said, but showing her in-game win rate per time also shows that she's effectively strong throughout the entire game. One thing that this champ does have going for her though is that I think she's really cool. The theme is amazing. The idea that she's basically a ZZ Rod portal but in a champion's kit is a much better approach because that item was toxic for the game, and generally she's a lot of fun to play. I actually really enjoy playing this character, and if you ever put any time into her, you would know that she's satisfying to pilot. And I don't think that she's as fundamentally unfair or as difficult to balance as other champions that we've seen in the past. It's just that sometimes things need to change about a kit in order for their long-term health to be in line. Remember when Akali could true stealth under your turret, the R was a micro stun, the Q would heal, and she could Q during her E? The list goes on and on with this character. She's been changed like a million times. Whatever it is that Bel'Veth needs to feel better to play against and lose a certain degree of agency inside of solo queue, I'm pretty much fine with. But please, Riot, just don't ignore it any longer. This champion is clearly a cut above the rest, and the success that Bel'Veth mains have had in the last year is not replicated by any other champion. At least not over multiple patch cycles and across multiple different regions. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you learned something. If you are a Bel'Veth main, please don't take this video too seriously. I promise that I don't have some personal vendetta against you, okay? I promise, she's just OP. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.